Hello, everyone. This is Heidi Hayes Jacobs, and I'm absolutely thrilled to have two colleagues joining us from the Dominican Republic. And I'd like to introduce them and have them tell us a little bit about their school. But we're going to get to their story about streamlining and storyboarding, and the interesting things they've learned along the way in their journey so far. I think those of you who are in the international school community will find this resonant. But quite honestly, I think anyone in any school that is really student centered will find this a particularly valuable conversation. So let me introduce Carla Meyrink and Nicole Jorge from the Community of Learning in Santo Domingo. And if you would, Carla, tell us a little bit about the school. I believe you're the co-founder of that school.
Yes, I am. Well, Heidi, we're really happy to be here. Thank you. The Community for Learning is a small, innovative school that we founded 27 years ago now, and basically because we wanted to do something different. And the fun thing about it is that we have been able to continue exploring and changing as we go along. And I have now a team of incredible coaches and leaders and principals, teachers who really know what's going on. And many of our teachers have been with us for 18 years or so. And they're ready to change and keep learning all the time. So it's a very dynamic place to be. And I think we're constantly looking at how we can improve things for the kids. That's basically
what grade levels are in the school?
We run from pre-K to 12th grade.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
Nicole, I know that you were formerly a fiction writer and a journalist, and then you've spent 8 or 9 years now working with students from upper elementary through high school, especially focused on language and writing and all the great things that go with being a literate person. Tell us a little bit about your experience at the school.
Well, I'm a former journalist, but a current fiction writer. I've been at the Community for Learning for about 4 years now. I've taught 9th grade, 10th grade. I'm currently the instructional coach for language arts. And I love the liberty that I've had to I want to say explore different techniques to help students become more avid readers, which a lot of them already are. Find their voice as writers. It's been like Carla gave me an invitation to explore, and it's been a beautiful experience so far.
Well, with that in mind, I think one of the things that I was drawn to in your school is that notion that you are very place-based and you're very much phenomena-based. You're based in the student's actual experience, and that isn't always easy to sustain while you're also staying credentialed as a very highly regarded international school in a major city in your country. And so what I'm curious about is, in terms of our conversation, is given that's your pedagogy, your approach, what drew you to streamlining and to storyboarding? And either one of you, take it and run with that.
I'll start with that. Since I discovered your book basically through probably a Twitter group, a discussion, because that's where I was going in the past to get all my information, basically. And we have been streamlining our curriculum basically since COVID began. At the end of COVID, we realized how overloaded everybody was, how hard it was, and the kids were feeling such stress. And every time we turned around, there was more being put on the plates of teachers. And although we kept saying to teachers, take stuff off, they couldn't really. It's hard to do that. So we decided we needed to take the curriculum and begin to streamline it for them so they felt less pressure. Because before we had a curriculum where we said, you can make choices. But they didn't see it that way as choices. They saw it as all this stuff we have to cover. So we thought it would be important to streamline. And we tried a couple of years ago, we began really working on the social studies curriculum. And we found it very difficult. Everybody had their view. Everybody held on to what they loved teaching. And we wanted it to be our team effort. In our school, we do everything through the team. We don't tell them what to do. We come up with it together. And it was a good 1.5 year long process to get us there. It was hard. So when I saw your book last year, and it was Streamlining the Curriculum through Storyboarding, I was like, oh, this sounds so cool. I started looking at it. And Nicole already ran her language arts classes as a year-long story. And she had become, she was a coach language arts teacher. And this past year, I asked her just to only coach while she worked with the language arts curriculum and streamlining it. So I gave her that book and I said, Nicole, this sounds like you. I think that this might help. And she ran with it. So it's Nicole's story after that.
Well, Nicole, run with it. Tell us some things. What did you do?
Well, before I started using the book, what I'd done when I was the 9th grade teacher was I had one big concept and one big question. And everything that the kids did in that class, whether it was reading or writing, revolved around that big concept, that big question. And so at the end of the year, the student's job was basically to wrap it up. Like, what did you learn based on, it was invisibility then. Like, what have you learned about invisibility? And to be honest, I loved the way it turned out. The work they produced, their insights, I thought it was beautiful. And I had the same experience the year before. So when I started coaching, I wanted that same sense of, let's have one big concept, let's have essential questions that drive all of the learning. And I wanted to do that from 7th to 12th grade. And what I asked my teachers to do was, if there is one thing that your students will take away from your class, what will that be? And based on that, let's write a story. Like, what will your students learn? Like, let's say that 7th grade is that first chapter of the story. What will they learn then? It has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, even if 7th grade is just like exposition. And so it was so organic, but it was awesome because it just flowed. All of the teachers, we have 3 teachers, they wrote their story for 7th and 8th grade, and then 9th and 10th, 11 and 12. And when we put it all together, I want to say that we worked to tweak it, but we didn't. It seems as though one concept opened the door for the next one. And then from there, we had the high school story or the language arts high school story of a student at TCFL.
Now, this is interesting to me, and I want to elevate this so we're clear about something, because you've done something that I think is a wonderful iteration from some of the ideas that Allison and I wrote about. You've done something, maybe because you are a writer, I don't know for sure. But usually when people storyboard, and there's no one approach, there's no question about it, they'll start by looking at, even a fairly traditional curriculum and give it some juice and look at how could we lay this out and convey it to students. And when we translate the storyboard into student-friendly language, they start to understand it. What I think I'm hearing you say, which I had picked up before, but I want to kind of tease out a little bit, is you were asking the teachers, as I hear you, to actually stop and think about the whole set of learning experiences they're going to have, and really what matters most. Yep. And almost making that the antagonist of the story, if I can press it a little bit. Like, the story is really about this. It's about what matters most and how we carry that through the year. You in a way are having them reflect on it more deeply before they even go to storyboarding. Am I hearing you right?
Yes, actually, to be honest, I don't think this was intentional, because when Carla gave me the book, I had already begun. And so what I had the teachers do was we wrote the story together. And then from there, they started thinking about their units. About a month after we had that fleshed out, Carla gave me the book. And then it was beautiful because it's we were creative writing the story of your courses.
That's right.
And it made sense. And then when I had asked the teachers, your students are the protagonist of your own little story, right? And they're the protagonist all throughout high school. That's their main role. They're the protagonist, but what are our roles? And it was wonderful to find the language in your book. We are creative writing the curriculum, and then we are going to edit that curriculum. And then we're going to compose the curriculum. And it's just like, it was just, I guess, a framework that allowed me to make sense. Like in my mind, it made sense. Maybe because I had already tried to do something similar the years before, or because I am a writer. To be honest, I'm not sure. But your book gave me the opportunity to make it make sense for them.
That's great. I mean, that really is. It's very reassuring. Part of it in writing through a book or a model, what you're trying to do is help people make sense and give them some possible actions that will help them, but not be too rigid. There has to be a degree of flexibility. I think that's in part the goal. And what you've added is a wonderful angle on this. And I really like calling that out. I have a question for you. Did you or have you begun to work with other subject areas in a similar way, or other grade level groups? Where are you now in this, or are you emerging now in that initial wave of teachers you worked with that you mentioned? Where are you on moving it to other areas, or are you thinking about that?
So yeah, we are, and because it's been so positive, we do a 5-year series of the curriculum gets revised, each subject across each year, and then we start again. So next year, math is up. And I think it's going to be really interesting because math is such a different subject area than language arts, and, you know, a different mindset. But I really think that it will be helpful for the teachers to think in that way. The math coach will get into it. I also really think it's helpful that we began with language arts, because language arts just sort of naturally flows into the storyboarding. The teachers are more familiar with that way of thinking, and then we'll move on to math. We have a platform that we use for professional development, and I began storyboarding the courses that we have in that platform, and simply because I was kind of jealous of Nicole. She was having so much fun and it was so creative. And I like to try the new things as well, but I don't have a class to try it in. So I decided to do it with the professional learning. And for me, it was amazing how much it helped me make the courses more cohesive, pare them down to what was essential, and not just, there was a lot of blah, blah, blah in there, I have to admit. Stuff that was extra, that was too much, that I think would overwhelm the teachers. And it made me clearly see what I needed to focus on. It helped me streamline the professional learning as well. And I loved it. It's creative, it's fun, and it really helps you focus on that. And then what happened from there is one of our coaches was looking at the professional learning. She's working with a group of teachers, and she said, Carla, this is so cool. Can I do this with the professional learning I'm doing? She's working on cross-curricular projects, and she said, I would love it if each of the cross-curricular project groups had their own storyboard. So they're beginning to work on that. And so I see that it's like I love a grassroots thing where you start small and it just spreads of its own accord, and naturally it makes it easier to have others join forces and go on. And then Nicole will be working with the language arts department in elementary. As soon as she's finished with secondary, they'll be moving into elementary to create it as well. That's
great. Yes, I think what you've reflected is often something that does happen. There's a kind of contagion. Yeah. And professional learning, I have seen school leadership. There has been work, and a number of places have begun to do that work, and it works really well. I think it really is about making explicit sense. And one of the things that shifts is your audience, because you're really writing the curriculum for your audience, and whether it's adult learners or your colleagues. I think you said, I want to pick up on something you said that not everyone always gets, which is, when you storyboard, you really do have to think about what's extraneous. You said that so clearly, Carla, and what matters most, and what is it you really want your students, as you were mentioning before, Nicole, to not only leave with, but engage with along the way. One sidebar I'd make, just because we've talked about math a little bit here, math is terrific to work with on this. And I think the thing to note is that each subject, when you do have to do with subjects, it's different than when you do interdisciplinary. And it isn't to say one is better than the other. It's you choose choices for different types of learning. But within math, there is a sort of built-in pathway, because more than any of our other subjects, it's our most abstract discipline, that and music. It's all symbolic representations. And sequence matters. So the story here is amplifying, when you do a storyboard in math, the connections. In other words, I can't really move into subtraction as a 6-7-year-old unless I know what addition is. How do I show the connection to the previous chapter, so to speak? That sometimes when a math teacher go like, oh no, it'd be easier in ELA, I'm going, I don't know. I just think you have a different story you're telling, and to be careful. I don't think I'm worried about you. I want to just say it because sometimes ELA runs with this, or sometimes social studies does. And you'll come to other subjects and they'll go, oh, no, not at all. If the student doesn't see the narrative thread across the year and the connections, they aren't going to be able to be really highly functioning mathematicians. And so it's just interesting to see when you say it's organic. I agree. And I want to make sure we are alert to maybe a couple flags that can come up from other subjects and sort of attend to them and look at them. Does that resonate with you? Absolutely.
And it's something we're a little bit, a little nervous about, like, how are we going to do this and how is it going to grow? It's a challenge, I think, and we have to, I guess, just approach it in the right way. But I think it's clear that the storyboards make the learning so much more relevant for the students. And I think when teachers see that, how that becomes so much more relevant, then you want that for your students, So I'm sure that we will face some challenges and we will have to prepare in advance for it. But I think if we can get through it, it will be very, very helpful to everyone. I'm really excited about it.
One thing that you might want to do, and we update this regularly, and that is on our website. Allison and I have curriculumstoryboards.com, as you're aware, but we post regularly a gallery of rotating samples, and there are math samples in there. But you're always welcome to go there, and we'll send you some too. I mean, I think sometimes just looking at a few examples would be great. We'd love to be able to post some of yours. So send a few our way, and we'll share those as well.
That would be excellent.
One thing I'm curious about is how, Nicole, how you're using the storyboards directly with the learners. Do you give them to them? Do they respond to them? Do they comment on them? Or what have you begun to find of value? Because that's really who we're writing them for, ultimately.
Well, so far, we're still very much not early in the process, but we're just kind of sort of beginning. And the learners so far are the teachers. And so what I have been doing is I've been modeling the process, the process that we're doing to streamline the curriculum, I storyboarded. And so my goal is within the next, I want to say, few weeks to start doing it with the teachers so that they then can share it with the students.
Great. I think that makes a lot of sense. Do you anticipate or can you envision ways you'd like to see them or encourage them to use it with students?
Oh, what I love about this is it's sort of like that whole high school story. I've shared with a group of students I teach an elective on multimodal storytelling. And I shared the story with them just because I taught them in 9th grade, I taught them in 10th grade, and I wanted to see if they could see that in themselves as students. And when they read it, it was astonishing to see how they picked up on, we came to realize this when we read this novel or when we wrote this writing piece. And so if I can transmit that to the teachers so that they can create the storyboards and share it with the students, let's say at the start of each unit. And it's sort of like having the students understand that this is just a little chapter that adds up to a bigger story. That's my goal, that they anticipate, all right, this is what we're doing in 9th grade, but in 10th grade, Like what comes next? That anticipation of a narrative that they're a part of.
That's terrific. I noticed too, and I think it's important that eventually Allison and I have been talking a lot lately. We didn't write about it, but what's happened over the last year since the book came out is we're very aware of the phrase versions, that there can be a version of a storyboard for parents. There can be a version, like you're writing a version for professional learning, primarily for teachers. But you could, in fact, take that same one, tweak it a little, and provide it to a school board or council. You know what I'm saying? And you can write a storyboard if you're writing it for your Ks or your year ones. You write it in a language they understand. And so one thing is to think of audiences. And I've noticed you're very keen on staying connected with your community. You call yourself community learning. So I'm curious how you are anticipating sharing this with various members of the community. I love your what do you call it? Community coffee or something like that?
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea. So tell us a little bit about the different ways you might want to share the larger community.
With community coffee, that in itself is a series of basically lessons for parents. Like every month we have a community coffee and we have it around a theme that we're sharing some information with them. It does open up to, comments and question and answers at the end, but we always begin with a theme. And we were thinking that having now, instead of just, oops, this community coffee, we're doing this and inviting people in, if we could give them a storyboard of what's coming up, maybe for the next, maybe not for the entire year, because we don't always know how, but at least for the next 3, and they have a cohesive sort of something going through them, I think it would really attract our parents more to come in and see what they can ask questions about, feel more involved in what they're doing, and again, see the relevance of what we're bringing to them.
That's fabulous.
That's what we're hoping. Yeah. But I would like to know how you would suggest, I'm sorry to turn this around, but how would you suggest that, for instance, Nicole would share the language arts storyboard with parents? Because I think that's important too. No?
Well, sure. It's what we find. It's a conversation, of course. I think what we find is the visual, we really believe in the visual aspect of the storyboard. You've seen the way we espouse it. You've seen the book. What we think really works best is the version that the students have should go home. Okay. And if you choose, you can have, how you can have the various elements, and you don't want to have too many. But if for example, we have, let's say, a storyboard in science for, let's say, 8-year-olds, grade 3, year 3, and it's about you're studying the ecosystems and biomes in the Dominican Republic, something like that. And we're going to start with this one first, and then we'll build and look at that and how they connect. And I'm an ecologist, and there's a thing about the tools I use. And you have a whole series of units across, and it's storyboarded very clearly, very invitational language. You're putting the focus, the image, the essential questions, and a brief description. If you were doing a version for parents, the kids would have that much anyway. They don't care so much about standards. They don't care. They might, but you could include it. You could put in parent resources or ideas to support it. Take your child to this park, or whatever it is. And so cool. They get the benefit of seeing from what their students are seeing. And the nickname often is the refrigerator curriculum, because if you give them an actual hard copy, they put it on the fridge and they talk about it. High school kids love that too, by the way. So one is that. Another is that sometimes things like back to school night or parents' conferences, it's so much easier for somebody who's not an educator, anybody, to follow the through line and make meaning from it. And I think that tends to be a pretty good way of working that way. One thing that I didn't want to lose, though, is you raised something that came up. Actually, yesterday I was with another group I was coaching, and what came up is this group is interested in doing very immediate kind of current issues, emergent curriculum, phenomena-based around some community problems, and they don't know exactly what it's going to be yet. It's kind of it's project-based learning, but a little different, same sort of thing. They said, how do we storyboard that? Because, we're laying out the year, we don't know what's going to happen. And I thought of that as you were talking about your community coffee, because you may not know which each theme is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
When you do it, you're using more of a diary model that, if I know I'm going to be doing math, I'm not going to throw fractions out. I know I'm going to be teaching decimals. I'm going to lay it out. I can change it as I go. That's different from something that's emergent. So you do it more. The story emerges as you go, and you make meaning along the way. So one methodology, and now you say I'm bringing this full circle back, as with your parent piece, you may have some anchor experiences you're going to do through the year. One of the themes we're definitely doing has to do with maybe something like safety issues or something. I don't know. But it could be periodically you kind of keep it open. And so we're going to add this on an ongoing basis and just say that's what's happening. People are fine with that because not everything is planned.
Idea. Mm-hmm.
So those are just a few other thoughts. Well, we have a few minutes left, and I just want to sort of ask you if you were coaching people with comparable roles. So I'm going to start with you, Nicole. There are a lot of people out there who are curriculum leaders, instructional coaches, department chairs, division heads who will have a similar role to make this happen and inspire and get teachers engaged. Do you have some thoughts or some ideas or things you've learned you'd be willing to share as we finish up today?
Yeah, of course. One of the things I've told Carla often is that I feel that because I did it first in my own classroom, it was very easy to then translate that and transfer that to the rest of the language arts team. I don't think it would have been as easy a process had I tried to do this like with all the teachers at the same time without having done it myself first. So I think that's number one, to really try it out with one teacher first, like do a pilot and then streamline with the rest of the department. And the other thing is, I think it's very, sometimes we think that we're doing something that's, I don't want to say that it's like different. What I'm trying to say is that story is universal. And so the more we lean into that, like the more we lean into the fact that we're writing stories, we are a part of our stories, and we're trying to, like, I've tried to share that with my teachers often. Like this is humanity. It's easy to do this. It's not a challenge if we approach it through that lens.
That's great. Thank you very much. We have a question we'll get to in just a moment from Sheila. Thank you. But let's continue on. Similarly, as a school head, talk to us, Carla. How would you coach your colleagues on working this and initiating this work? There's so much interest, and I know schools are different, but you're a pro. Tell us any.
So I guess I'm always a big believer, like Nicole, in piloting. I'm not a believer in coming in and swooping over the school and saying we're all going to do this. When that's kind of it's a recipe for failure usually, because it's hard to get everybody on board, and some people will be more resistant than others. So I find that it's best to have enthusiastic teachers who are really excited about something, get started with it and be successful. And that success tends to spread across, and that's what we're seeing. We're seeing this not just, language arts, math, but professional learning, and within those professional learning groups, people want to start doing it. So as they're doing this in their professional learning groups, these are teachers who are teaching math, science, social studies all together. They're going to want to do this when we start to bring it into their subject areas, I think, or most of them will. And I think, there's a fear factor. It's nerve-wracking to be told to do something new again, and we're always asking teachers to do new things and to try new things. So I think being very supportive, being there with them, going into the rooms and working with your groups to be just a very positive support person for them. I think that's really important as well. But this particular one is so creative and so much fun that I think that it's a little easier to get people on board. But I would always say small to big.
Yeah, I actually have to, I'm just smiling too, because Allison and I are just stunned. I mean, this isn't my first rodeo. I've been around the block for decades and decades. And I have never, ever in my career had any model or initiative that has made people so excited.
Yeah.
The attitude, it's because they are really, you're tapping into creative writing, but they get to own it again. It's an up, and there's been so much pressure on people, and it really is striking. That kind of leads us to the question that Sheila asked. I don't want us to finish without addressing her question, which is, what would be good advice to move from traditional curriculum documents, creating curriculum storyboards? Let me start and take a crack at that. And then if either one of you want to add on, how does that sound? Good?
Okay.
All right. Sheila, I would say most people start with traditional documents. And in fact, it's one of the reasons storyboarding is so interesting, is because we're trying to make what we often teach, which sometimes can feel not particularly engaging, more accessible and understandable to students. So whether you use curriculum maps and you've laid them out in your year-long context, you've got your units of study across the year, you literally can start by taking one of the templates. And we provide all kinds of templates and tools and workbooks. You can get that. So you can use a very simple graphic. You can also just create your own. You don't start to revise it right away. Just lay out what your unit titles are. Then what you begin to do is you can write that focus. What is it you are really trying to have happen? And try, maybe even in your second draft, if not your first, to do it in an invitational style. If you want to use placeholders, sure, students will be able to, but that isn't really writing that's interesting for them. And what you're going to do is not just talk about what your objectives are, but what they're going to be experiencing. After that, we begin to go back, think of those titles again. Maybe they could be a little more interesting, but grab an image that really captures the essence of what you're working on. And the act of thinking about, this is for my students, as I lay this out, is very important. Next coaching point would be, when you look at the descriptions across your units, rewrite them to ensure you've got a through line. Are they connected? Does that second unit reflect back anything from the first one? If it doesn't, you've got a little bit of work to do. So in a sense, it's a revision, editing process. That's what creative writing is. You start with drafts, you go back, you begin to look at it, and finally look at a lot of examples. Honestly, I would say 2/3 of the places, maybe even 75% of the places Allison and I work with, are starting with traditional work, and then they end up making it more interesting. And they also, along the way, are doing a little bit of that streamlining piece too. But I would say that might be of help to you. Carla, Nicole, anything you want to add? Does that resonate for you?
Well, I would add that you said it makes it easier for students to understand, but I would say it also makes it easier for teachers to understand. Some of our curriculum documents are really unfriendly. Teachers look at them and they're like, what do I do with this? It's like not exactly fun to look at them. And this is so much more engaging. And Nicole was mentioning that when a new teacher comes on board and this is all in place, how much easier it will make it for that teacher to follow what we're doing. Nicole, right?
Yeah, I agree. I wanted to add that if it's possible, I do believe in writing out the story first. Something that I've seen with my own teachers is that we reflect every so often on how's the story going. And it's funny because it's an invitation to, are there any plot holes? Are there any things that you said your students were going to learn that you haven't covered yet? And because it's a story that you're teaching, I guess it's easy to just go back and read it. It's about a paragraph or two, and reflect on it along the way.
Great suggestions and refreshing and new. I think this is really will spark a lot of discussion. Sheila, thank you for asking. We are going to wrap it up, and I simply want to thank you for taking time out of your very busy day to share your knowledge and your enthusiasm. Thank you so much. It's been a great session, and we will see you again soon. And please continue to follow us on LinkedIn or on YouTube or on X, on any of the social media platforms that you use. And thanks again, Carla, and thanks again, Nicole, and best to you and your colleagues.
Thanks so much, Heidi. This was great.
My pleasure.
Bye. Bye.